So over the past few weeks, I've been creating this document on shoulder rehab. This is far from exhaustive as I've only referred to one chapter in a textbook and an article that I've read. But I think before I continue adding to this document, I should start making sense of everything and making sure that the way it was presented makes sense and flows nicely, almost like a story being told. Another thing I'd like to point out is the way that the information is set up is in no way easy to read. And so for this, I'm going to refer back to a study technique that I've used during university that guaranteed me excellent grades and excellent recall during exams. So for example, for an exam, we have per document, there was a specific topic. So let's say one of them, it talked about the cardiovascular system. So instead of studying and going through that 30-page document talking about, the cardiovascular system over and over and over again, once I was done studying all of that information, one way for me to test it out was to create like a single page, ideally, or a double-sided page with all of the information that I need organized into sections. So let's say the cardiovascular system, going through the PDF document, I noticed that it could be that all the information fell under 7 big sections. So let's say here on my page, on my blank page, I would create those sections here. Oops. Okay. So yikes. I'm still not very good at good notes here. Okay, so let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So, and let's say, the last one was the biggest one. Okay, so that I would just leave a little bit more space for that section. And then so what I would do is I would name these sections based on the notes. Okay, so you can see here that already, instead of trying to remember information that you've read in a 30-page document, during your exam, when you're being asked a question, it's a lot easier for you to picture this, and go through it mentally to remember any information. So let's say section 2 had made lots of paragraphs, but at the end, once you know your stuff, you notice that all the information could be kind of organized into a bullet point list. Whoa. I don't even know where I'm writing this. Let's say 6 things to know. Whatever. So then when I'm asked a question, it's like, oh yeah, these were the 6 important things to know about that section. And this was also a really good technique, when, let's say, the teacher asks you things like name 4 examples of. So that was another way that helped me remember information that I needed by doing like a visual representation of the information. So by sections, numbers, and obviously diagrams. So if things could be organized in a diagram, obviously that would help a lot. And also to compare, right? So let's say when, we're talking about this, there were 3 things to know about it versus this was 2. So it's less likely for you to kind of get things mixed up when everything is represented for you visually. So this is a little bit what I'm trying to go for when I'm going to reorganize everything. And you can see that I kind of was doing it a little bit while I was taking notes, but obviously this is very messy and it honestly does not make sense and everything is everywhere. So I think what I'm going to do is really just ask myself a specific question that I want to know about the shoulder structure and function, so that from there, as I'm answering this question, I kind of know how to organize information. So for example, what's going on during shoulder abduction? Do I know the movements? What is going on during shoulder abduction? What's happening at the scapula, right? So during shoulder abduction, for example, so let's say that's the posterior view here. I want to bring my arm up to the side. I've got here my shoulder blade. What is going on during this? So what I know is that there are 3 movements happening at the same time at the scapula. Okay, so when I'm bringing my arm up, there's external rotation going on. Okay, but now the external rotation, what am I looking at to know if it's external internal rotation? Sorry, I said external rotation, I meant upward rotation here. My apologies. So upward rotation, I'm looking at the glenoid fossa, so that's my reference. And here in my notes, I had kind of I drew a little visual of that here. So for upward and downward rotation, what are we looking at here? The glenoid fossa. Same thing during internal external rotation. So again, during abduction of the arm, what's going on? There's an external rotation of the scapula, right? So the glenoid fossa is gonna kind of point towards the back a little bit. And lastly, what's going on? There's going to be a tilt. So the scapula is going to posterior tilt. So what are we looking at here to know if there's an anterior posterior tilt? We're looking at the acromion and the inferior angle of the scapula. So when there's a posterior tilt, what's going on is these 2 structures are going to point towards the back. In an anterior tilt, they're going to point towards the front. So that's great. Okay, so I know what's going on at my scapula when there's shoulder abduction. Okay, let's say I'm going through my notes here, yada, yada, yada. And then I read here, these movements allow or maximize the function of the glenohumeral muscles. Okay, let's stop here. Do I know my muscles? And do I have that information here? Yes, I do. So I have them here. So at the shoulder, which is the glenohumeral joint, I've got all the muscles here. And during abduction, you got the deltoids and the supraspinous, specifically at that joint, but the movements that I described here were happening at the scapula, right? So what is allowing for example, upward rotation of the scapula? I have them here, the traps, specifically the upper and lower fibers, and the stratus anterior, right? So, okay, great. So now I know that I have the information, but is it organized in the best way possible? So this is, I wanted to discuss a little bit how I'm going about this, just, you know, for someone else who's also trying to build their little resource of information to help them in their practice, because honestly, when you look at this, it could be quite overwhelming. And this, again, it's just one chapter in a textbook. So this is far from being exhaustive. I'm going to keep adding to it. But before I add to this, I need to organize this, or else I'm going to end up having to go through 50 pages of information with everything that is everywhere. And at that point, I'll just be punishing myself, honestly. So I think now would be a good time for me to already get started with this, so that as I keep reading about the shoulder joint, I can add to it right away in the right section. Because I already have another textbook lined up, and I'm excited to get started. So let's start a time lapse. These are always fun, and let's get to it. All right, I'm calling it a night. I'm barely able to focus anymore. However, I do think that I am getting somewhere. So today I obviously did mostly elevation. So what's left is going to be organizing the muscles of depression, and I'm going to go through my notes on the upward rotators of the scapula and see like the main points that I want to summarize here, so not everything is everywhere, and just finish cleaning that up. But then I think I found like the right structure, and honestly, you can already see the difference where information that was spread out on like 1, 2, 3 pages, I was able to kind of summarize it on a little bit more than half a page here. But at least things are making sense, and I'm seeing how everything is tied in together, and obviously doing the distinction between movements at the scapula versus the glenohumeral joint. So that's really important not to get things mixed up. And also one thing that I really wanted to make sure that I understood was that, let's say during elevation and depression of the scapula, they're not isolated movements. There's going to be, depending, tilting of the scapula, and then also external internal rotation when there's retraction and protraction of the scapula. So I think I'm starting to really make sense of my notes here and really starting to like write a story that will be easy for me to remember and connect the dots when I am questioning my clients about their pain. And so I can more easily visualize, all of this information, say, okay, maybe with this person it's more an issue of this versus that. So anyways, I think I'm gonna end it here and take a break, and we'll get back to it soon enough.